Hey, welcome to CapeMEN. Thanks for being here. My name is David Drum, and what you're about to watch is the teaching portion of our Tuesday night men's group. If you're interested in learning more about who we are and what we do, be sure to look in the description of this video for the links to Facebook and Instagram. Thanks for being here. All right, guys, go ahead and have a seat. Thank you for being here. Just remembered, hey, if this is your first time here or we haven't met yet, my name's Dave Drum, and I get to be the men's director here. And if you've been coming for a while, you'll notice that the stage looks a little bit different tonight. That's because we're going to do something a little bit different. You know, for years and years, people have told me, you know, that phrase. It's, you show me your friends and I'll show you your future. And if I would have showed you who my friends were 15, 20, 25 years ago, you would not see the future that God gave me. And a great deal of what you see in my life now has to do with the people that I surrounded myself with, specifically my friend Mike Ash, who is going to join me here on stage. So Mike Ash is the South Tampa campus pastor for Grace Family Church. Man, that is a mouthful. But more importantly, Mike Ash is one of my closest and longest friends. And before we get into tonight, I do want to tell you, we're shifting up gears a little bit because obviously Mike and I are going to have a conversation up here.
And who else likes the really manly chairs that Dave picked out, everybody? So good. Wow. So good. So good.
It matches your shirt.
That's true. That's true.
And I didn't pick out the shirt. So those of you who know me know that, you know, there is a sixth love language, and it is trash talk, and we are both fluent. But we're going to do our best to bring that down half a notch anyways, because actually what we're going to talk about tonight, I think, is probably one of the most important topics when it comes to your Christian walk and your growth. Because at the end of the day, you guys do see guys like me and Pastor Brian up here, and we talk openly about our past and our past slip-ups and mistakes and things like that. But maybe only one or two of you guys ever knew us then. And I think it's easy, as a guy who used to sit in a chair like that, to look at the guys up here and go, well, yeah, of course you guys do accountability. Of course you guys talk to each other about that stuff. But that's not what guys like me do. Well, this is one of the key components from going from a guy like I was 20 years ago to a guy like I am now. You know, still in progress, but not quite in the same place. So we'll get started off with this question, Mike. What is accountability, and why is it important to us?
Yeah, that's a good question, especially for guys, because I think sometimes for us it's hard to, like, accountability is one of those things where the idea is it's letting people into the places in your life that nobody else really gets to see. Like the deep stuff, right? Like it's kind of that idea. And I think what accountability is, it's I think the way we've described it is that there are certain dark rooms in your heart, dark rooms in your mind, where you think things that you hope nobody else sees. You have fantasies about things you hope nobody else sees. You have some of those things. And everyone should not know that stuff, okay? Not your spouse. If you're married, your spouse shouldn't know that stuff. Because if she knew what was up here, man, she would think something like you're messed up, right? So you shouldn't do that. But there should be somebody. There should be someone that has access to know about what you think about, what you're struggling with, what you're tempted with. And so accountability it's finding someone, probably one or two people, not usually more than two, one or two people that you can be completely open and honest and tell all the stuff you hope nobody else finds out about you. And so I think for us, doing accountability, it is our opportunity to talk about things with each other that we wouldn't talk about it in front of this room as far as like the details of it. We wouldn't tell our spouses. So not everyone should know everything, but someone should know everything. And so that's what accountability is. It's our opportunity to tell someone everything.
Yeah, and for us, we got started on this probably close to 15 years ago.
Yeah, what made you, okay, so Dave is, if you don't know this police officer, I'm a pastor. What made you decide, like, what was the trigger for you that got you into it, where you're like, hey, I really need this in my, like this is a big deal?
Well, so those of you who have been coming for a while know a few weeks ago I talked about really an issue, a stumbling that I had in my marriage. And in the wake of that, as I was, working through counseling and working with my wife to try and heal and repair our marriage and let God heal and repair our marriage, what I knew was I was living in different compartments. And I think a lot of guys, we do this. It's like, well, that's the work box, that's the, the guy box, and this is the home box. And as long as we keep all those boxes separate, everybody's happy. Well, for me, God removed all those dividers on purpose and let all of that spill together and let me see what a mess of my life I had made. And coming out of that, I knew I had to change, but I didn't know how. I didn't know where to start. So I reached out to Mike really for guidance. I didn't go to Mike and say, hey, I want to do accountability with you. I said, I'm a moron, and I screwed up my whole life and almost detonated my marriage. What do I do now? And that's basically where we started.
Yeah, and for me as a pastor, you would think, and this is what I think guys, we tend to think, we think like pastors have like this, like they live a whole different life, right? They're not guys. They don't struggle with stuff. They're like, and I kind of got saved in a church where the pastors were like the separated men of God who had their own parking spot and all wore suits. Like it was like legit. And so when I became a pastor, I thought like, I'm going to get a cape. Like the superpowers are coming, right? And honestly, it didn't happen. What happened was now everyone thought I was better than I was, but I still struggled. I still thought women were hot that weren't my wife. Like I still like all that stuff. And I'm like, okay. And then you start seeing pastors drop. And then a guy has an affair and his marriage, his ministry, his kids jacked. Then another one and another one. And it was that feeling for me where it kind of at the same time where we were thinking, man, that can't be us. Like that can't be us. I've got to figure out a different way. So when Dave came, that was our opportunity where he said, hey, what do we do? And I said, well, I'm kind of in the, like, I hadn't messed anything up, but I'm like, hey, I think what we need to do is we need to come together and do this accountability thing and try to figure out a way to do it in a way that works. Because here's what I think for us as guys, there's a scripture that says they have a form of godliness, but they deny the power. You know what a form of godliness but denying the power is? Hey man, how you doing? Yeah, I'm struggling, but yeah, I'm okay. How you doing? Yeah, I'm struggling. That's nothing. There's no specificity in it, and it is not powerful. The power comes in when you ask specifically some detailed questions, and you're honest to that level. And so we just got together, and we met like the first time. In our first meeting, I'll just tell you, it was the most awkward meeting you'll ever have in your life because we just said, all right, tell me everything. Tell me everything. What do you look at? What did you do? How often do you act out? How often do you, like we just did, and that first meeting, right, it was the most awkward meeting.
It was a good time. If you happen to like smashing your fingers with a hammer, it would be a good time.
Well, but here's what I would say with that, though, is either it was going to be awkward with Dave or it was going to be awkward with my wife. Like when I've got to sit my kids down on their bed and go, let me tell you why dad doesn't live here anymore. That's worse. When I got to stand up in front of the church and write a letter and, oh yeah, I can't be here anymore, that's worse. This is awkward, but that is worse awkward. Like I would rather endure the awkward conversation of accountability than the awkward conversation of failure. Okay? Like so if you think to yourself, oh, I could never do that. If you mess up, you're going to wish you did. You're going to wish you did. Anyways, I'm like pointing fingers, getting all acted up about it. It was just such a passionate thing to have that awkward conversation.
Yeah, and I think we phrase it, you just back the truck up. You just back the truck up and you dump it out on the table, and you let the other dude just sift through your junk. And the whole purpose of that is so that they know, hey, you said this was your history, this was your tendency, so why are you doing this thing over here? Why, when your wife is working night shift, why are you even online at night? Like, if that's gonna be an issue for you, like, don't do it. And I'm gonna ask you about it every single night that your wife's at work. But he wouldn't know to ask me questions like that if I don't tell him what my past history is. And one thing I wanna kind of throw out there is, and you and I kind of use the same terminology on this, is there tend to be three things that will bring a guy to his knees. Girls, glory,
Gold.
or gold.
Yeah.
So
Which is 1 John, is the lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, and pride of life. I think it's 1 John 2 or something like that, yeah.
And the thing there is, those are interchangeable sometimes. That pride and ego is like, oh, I'm not really attracted to that woman over there. I'm just trying to help her out. And you adopt your Superman cape, and you're just trying to be that knight in shining armor, even though you already were a knight in shining armor to somebody who you said I do to. And so sometimes I think as guys we're like, oh, well, women aren't really a problem for me. Like, I've never cheated on anybody I've been in a relationship with. Well, okay. How are your finances? Are you honest on your taxes? Or, where's your ego at? So as we talk through this idea of accountability, don't just resign it to, well, I don't look at porn, so I don't need this. This is really about exposing your whole life to somebody. Like Mike said, somebody who knows everything, knows all your junk, knows all your secrets, and knows how to call you out, and most importantly, has permission to call you out on it.
Yeah, and I think for us, we realize that anything that lives in the dark, it has two things. It has the ability to grow, and it will grow. And this is the deceit of our world right now. And I'm not hurting anybody. I'm looking at porn. I'm not hurting anybody. I'm looking at Instagram. I'm not hurting anybody. Listen, the number like finances and porn are like the two highest reasons for divorce right now. It will hurt. It'll hurt you. It'll hurt your kids. It'll hurt your family. Like, it'll mess you up. It has the ability to grow. If it's in the dark, it grows, and it will begin to control you. It'll grow and it'll control you. Over time, those things do that, and they end up growing into the light. And there's a verse in Numbers that says, your sin will find you out. Like, your sin will find you out. Like, you can keep it hidden for a little bit, but that thing will grow until it grows into the light. And the only way to take those things and to deal with them is, there's a confession element. You've got to tell somebody. That in James it says, confess your sins one to the other so that you may be what? You may be healed. How are you healed from it is when you confess. And so there's an element of confessing to God, but there is a mutual confession to each other that is so important. And I've told people before, because as a pastor, like, we'll do a talk like this and someone will come up to me and go, well, let me tell you my sin. And I'll go, no, don't tell me. The reason why is, I think if you grew up in like a Catholic church, the priest model is, you go and hide in a room and then you tell a priest something. The reason why it doesn't work is not accountability, it's confession. You're telling someone, but no one's going to keep you accountable. But when I tell Dave, and he's going to ask me about it next week, and he's going to have a conversation with me, and we're going to talk about it, like, there's an accountability side where, and if I'm doing something stupid, you know what he says to me? You're doing something stupid. That's good. Like we all need that. And so we can talk to each other like that. So that idea of taking those things that live in the dark and go, hey, not everybody has a flashlight, but this guy has a flashlight. This guy can go, hey, why do you feel that way? Hey, why are you doing this way? Hey, it sounds like you're a little mad about this. Hey, it sounds like you're operating in fear a little bit. Like, he'll ask questions that nobody else asks because I've given him a flashlight to look all around my life and go, is there anything living in the dark that can grow into something that will end up controlling me and will grow into the light and exposing me?
Yeah, and I like that analogy about you have that light, but there's really no magic bullet when it comes to temptation. And I don't care if you've been a Christian for 15 minutes, 15 years, or 37 years. It does not matter. Temptation will come for you. if the devil's not messing with you or trying to mess with you, you're probably not on his radar. And he's probably got you right where he wants you. But if he's messing with you, it's because he's trying to drag you back to something. And there's no magic bullet, but this is how you vaccinate yourself. This is how you help reduce some of these risks. Recently, I heard an analogy where they compared these temptations and a lack of accountability to those temptations to cancer. It's really hard to detect early, but it's pretty easy to treat. But it's really easy to detect later, but it's really hard to treat. Once it runs rampant in your system, it is much harder to get rid of these deep-seated habits and sins and behaviors that you've been, letting run wild for a decade. But if you get these accountability checkups early and often, and you are just being honest with your accountability partner, man, that sin doesn't have a chance to take root, because when that thought pops into your head, you're like, I am not telling Mike about that. I do not want to tell Mike. Oh, crap, I got to tell Mike about that. And I do, because here's the thing. The first step, I don't care what leader you imagine in your mind, whether they're political, financial, or faith. You put the image of that man or that man's name in your head, I guarantee step one to that failure was concealing it. The first thing they did was concealed something. It's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. Guys, it's a big deal.
Yeah, I heard somebody say that the common denominator is concealment and isolation. It's an idea of I can't tell anyone, I can't say anything, I can't do it. It's keeping it in the dark. It just does that, and it just grows there, and not being able to say some of those things. And I would say this when it comes to temptation too, because I'm a pastor, right? So every day I'm in the lobby, and there's a ton of people that come through. And one of the things that I've said to guys and said to pastors, and I'll say to you guys, is don't ever feel bad about being rude to temptation. And I think as Christians, sometimes it's that whole feeling of, I've got to be nice to everybody. No, you don't. You're good. If she's extra hot to you, don't talk to her. Well, what about somebody else has got it? God's got it. Don't talk to her. She flirts with you. Don't talk to her. Don't give her the time of day. Don't do it. Okay? So sometimes you have to actually decide. James says, flee from sexual, like flee. Like leave it alone. It's good. Well, what if she leaves the church? There are a lot of good churches around. A lot of good churches around. Like, I'm not trying to be mean pastorally. I'm just saying that for you, like, introduce it to your wife and then walk away and kind of let it, like some of those things actually go away. So I think for us, it's those moments of, even for us knowing each other's triggers, that as we're telling stories, as we're talking about some things, and as we're going through it, it helps us to flee, because if there's someone who's at the church who is extra attractive to me, which sometimes things happen, and I can tell him, well, now that I've told him, I know that next week he's going to ask me. And I'm now accountable for the way I interact, for the way that I, talk to that person, all those things. And so it just helps me hold the line a little bit better. And so I think for us, having these conversations has been good to pull back from some of that and not allow myself even live the fantasy in my head, or not let that fantasy go wild.
Well, and so you talked about that, the who's extra attractive to you. And sometimes it's not just appearance. Sometimes it's a personality. You just click with somebody.
Or geography. They're just around a lot.
Yeah.
Like, people become more attractive when you're, like women do sometimes, when you're just around them a lot more.
And the thing there is, and kind of springing off your comment about, don't be afraid to be rude to temptation. Here's the thing. Don't play maybe God needs me to. God isn't tempting you. God isn't going to tempt you. It says that in Scripture, that God doesn't tempt you. Now, and he also says that he'll provide a way out when you are tempted. Now, whether you choose to take that exit ramp, you make those introductions. You're not afraid to be rude to temptation. There's a lot of freedom in the unfollow button for those of you on social media. People would be like, oh, did you see that thing I posted? Oh, I must have missed it. Yeah, I missed it because I unfollowed you 10 years ago because all you do is post pictures of you at the beach. Like, I don't need to see your cleavage. I'm sure your husband loves it, and he should. I ain't gonna look at it no more. So if that means I miss out on something, yeah, I missed out on something I didn't need to see. A conversation I didn't need to have.
Yeah, one of the things I'm personally struggling with right now, I'm working through, is cutting off all social media because of that, because where it takes you. Because, and here's what, somebody said this yesterday morning. Here's what they said. They talked about this. They said, what did Jesus say when it had to do with temptation? He said, if something causes you to sin, what do you do with your eyes? You cut it out. You cut it out. Now tell me why you can't delete social media. I was like, dang, that was really good. So for me, I'm actually like personally struggling with this. Like, is it something that I'm going to keep or not? Because if it's something that can lead you in that direction, do we actually cut it out? So that's something I'm kind of wrestling through. Do you want to talk through? So we backed the truck up. So we did that in the first meeting. And then when we get together, basically we ask 4 questions. I'm going to tell you what they are. You guys can write them down if you want to. But these 4 questions basically give us the ability to flash the flashlight in our lives, especially as it has to do with women. Like this is kind of the big one. And so the first question is what's your water level? Okay, now they're a little disguised question, but what's your water level? What that means is, I don't know what this is about guys and the way we work, and this is probably different stages of life. This has been more true or not, but there are times where the water level's in, where it's like the temptation feels like it's everywhere. Like you feel like
everybody's hot.
Everybody's hot. And your eyes, you can't keep them to yourself, and you're looking at everybody, and you're looking around, you're like, dear Lord, I need to quit the gym. Like, what is happening? You feel like you need to walk around like that zone. When the water level's out, it's like, no, my wife's the only attractive one to me. But it's good to know what season we're in. It seems like it comes in seasons, and I don't know why. For some people, it's stress. Some people, like, they're lonely. Like, you go through seasons. But for us, it's good to know what season we're in so we can actually have that accountability and go through it. The second question is, who is messing with you? Who is messing with you? In other words, if you were to show up in the newspaper tomorrow with a name beside you as to this is the person you had an affair with, most likely who is that person? That doesn't mean you're close to it, but who's the most likely person in your world? Name a name. Name a name. Because specificity is the key to killing the fantasy, okay? You got to be specific. And so we know right now if there's anyone on our radar, anyone who's close, we have that conversation. And he knows who that person is for me, and I know who that person is for them. Now, neither of us, we are miles and miles and miles and miles away from it. But if anyone ever takes a step closer, we name their name, and it helps us to actually identify it and to pull it off. And so we ask, what's your water level? Who's messing with you? Have you acted out? This is an awkward one, guys. This is everything from that person that's extra attractive to you. Have you gone out of your way in the office to elicit attention? Or have you acted out, like, have you masturbated? We ask those questions. I don't know if we're allowed to say that in here, but we ask those questions. Here's the reason why. That's because for us, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about all this stuff, and we're being very specific about some of those things. And if it's something you struggle with, let me just say this. If you struggle with that, looking at something or thinking about stuff and acting out in that way, you tell someone every time you do, you'll get fixed real quick. Like, don't worry. It's only awkward about twice, and then it gets awkward pretty quick. And then the last question is there anything coming up or anything within your tendencies? So like we know if we're going to look at something on the internet, if we're going to flirt with someone, if we're going to do something, and really the flirting thing is probably, it's more like if we're going to go somewhere down a road, when are we most likely to do it? Well, we know when our most likely times are. So we know when those things happen for each other. So we can text each other during those times. We can talk about those times, but we want to make sure, hey, you got anything coming up, anything that you see coming. So like this past weekend was Easter for us. Well, Easter in the church world is like the Super Bowl. Well, it's amazing. It's woo. And then the next day, it's like the ministry. Honestly, for most pastors, the bottom drops out on Monday. And so you're just in a real vulnerable, weird place. Well, it's good for us to know that and for him to know that about me so that we can have those conversations and talk about this stuff. So those 4 questions have helped us take those things in the dark and bring them into the light.
Yeah, and you know, if you're sitting here right now and you're like, is it really that big of a deal? Because again, you know, maybe that temptation that would put you in the newspaper, maybe it's not a person. Maybe it's a behavior, an action, I round up on all my expense reports and nobody notices, you know, what's 75 cents here, $1.20 there. Well, it matters. It matters because there's something behind the action. So,
well, and it grows. That's the thing about any of these things. Yeah, it's no big deal. Who am I hurting? Sin does not stay. It does not stay minimal. Why do people get caught having affairs? Why do people get caught embezzling? It's because they start here thinking they can keep it here. Sin does not stay the same. Sin, the things in the dark grow. And so it starts with 75 cents and $1.25, and then it's $3, and then it's $10, then it's $20. And it starts going until suddenly it gets on top of you. You don't know what to do, and you become what? A slave to sin. You become a slave to it, and you don't know how to get out, so you just stay in it until eventually your sin will find you out.
Well, and so the thing there for me is whether it's social media, the internet, or your expense report, or just, I was just talking to her. I wasn't doing anything. It's not like we were hooking up. We just, said hi. Scripture's pretty clear. All things are permissible. We live under God's grace. Grace is new in the morning. God will forgive our behaviors. All things are permissible. Not all things are beneficial. Scripture's clear about that. Not all things are beneficial. So at some point, you have to make that decision. And I made that decision about 15 years ago. What is it that I want? Do I want to cross the finish line having the most notches in my bedpost? Or do I want to cross the finish line holding my wife's hand, walking in step with my kids, not ever having had my name in the papers because I detonated my career, my ministry? And here's the thing. It's easy for Mike to go to work on a weekend and find 100 women in his church who will tell him how awesome he is and what a great job he's doing. And if he lets that sink in, that will grow. I can go to work to my normal occupation, and I can convince myself that I am the law, that I make the decisions. You ever wonder when you see these law enforcement officers across the country, like, man, why would he think that's okay? Because it started with a small decision. Why would he think it's okay to take somebody's property and do that, or do that to an individual? Like a lot of times it's really blatant. Well, because at some point they decided, or they continued to conceal. Man, if I stop doing this now, they got me. Like, I got to continue to do this thing that I've been doing. I got to continue this behavior that I've been involved in. You put a young guy in a uniform and give him a gun, and they are convinced that they can do whatever they want. Unfortunately, they can get convinced that they can do whatever they want. And if they continue down that road, that doesn't change. So one of the keys to my occupational success is the same key to my marriage success, which is to have conversations weekly. So actually, maybe let's go there for a minute, kind of the nuts and bolts of what our pace looks like. Because obviously, we pointed out, Mike lives in Tampa. He didn't always live in Tampa. He lived here, lived in Birmingham, and he now lives in Tampa. And for, again, close to 15 years, our regular flow has been weekly check-ins.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we talk every Wednesday night. And so Wednesday night or Thursday, kind of depending on what our kids' schedules and stuff are. So we just call, it's on our schedule. We just call each other and we run through some of these questions and talk about this stuff. And it's been so good. And I'll say this, because some of you you're thinking in your head, who would I ever talk to? Like, who would I say all of this to? And here's what I think for us. One, you got to find someone you're close to, but you're never going to think to yourself, oh, they would love to hear this. Like they're not going to think that. And it may be somebody in here. Like I say, I don't think it's your table, but maybe it's one or two people that you just need to go and go, hey, here's something I think we need to do. And I would love for us to engage in this. And then you just have to push past the awkwardness to have this conversation. And so you have to trust them, though. And here's the reason why. Because when you tell them this stuff, now they have access to the stuff that you hope nobody finds out. And they have access, and you have access to that stuff too. It's the illustration we've used in the past is like I'm giving Dave a dagger, and he's giving me a dagger, and we can kill each other with each other's dagger at any point we want to. So there's a trust aspect, and then for he and I, the reason why as a pastor, Dave and I feel like works, is because both of our jobs are very lifestyle. So if I see someone from our church in the grocery store, I'm a pastor in that moment. If I see him anywhere, I'm a pastor in that moment. That's kind of the life of a pastor. We are men, but we're also pastors, and it's a lifestyle. Well, a police officer the same way. He's a police officer anywhere. So if he's at the grocery store and something goes down, regardless if he's off duty, he's on, like in that zone. So for us to be able to take off our hats of the roles we play in people's lives and do that has been very good for us to have that conversation, because he understands that about a pastor. I understand about a police officer, that we need to be men sometimes and just regular people. So you need someone that you can take off whatever fake hat you have on and just be a man and have that conversation. So on Wednesdays, we call each other and we just check in, and then we go through those 4 questions. It's not probably as formal as it once was because we're in such a rhythm, but we just ask, hey, what's your level right now? Who's messing with you? Have you acted out in any way? Have you done anything in any way? And then what's coming up? And we just run through these questions to make sure we're talking about some of this stuff. And then I would say, because we live far away, having time together once or twice a year, it just helps relationally make sure we're connected and we go through it.
Yeah, and actually one other question that I would say in recent years we got a lot better with, and it seems like a no-brainer, is we literally end every conversation with, how can I pray for you this week?
Yeah.
What's the thing I can pray for this week? And sometimes it's, man, like, right now, what I'm praying for you, I think has been the same for about 3 months.
Yeah.
Every week. Like, hey, I still got this. Anything else? Nope, just got it. Hey, there's nothing wrong with that. But every day, I pray for this thing for Mike. Why? Well, because if I want to protect this man, I'm going to try and hold a shield up in front of him in prayer daily and ask him to do the same for me. And, I don't know that we would have been successful if we would have started this on the phone. I think initially it had to be in person, and it was for years. It used to be 5 a.m. on Wednesday mornings. Mm-hmm. We'd meet at a Starbucks, and we would, get in the weeds over a cup of coffee. It's gonna look different. But guys, right now you might be thinking like, okay, maybe I need this. So if somebody asks me, I'll do it. I'm willing to do it if somebody asks me. I have news for you. The guy on your left, the guy on your right, the guy across the table, probably thinking the exact same thing. If somebody asks me, somebody's got to go first. And here's the great thing. Everybody in this room now, we just eliminated the most awkward part of the transition. Because now you can walk up to anybody in this room and go, hey, I like what Mike and Dave were saying. Do you want to do that? And that dude's not going to be like, what are you talking about? He knows what you're talking about.
So turn to someone right now. No, I'm just kidding. Wouldn't that be so awkward?
No.
So point at the person that you want to know.
So something we want to do different this week is, rather than immediately just wrapping up here and then turning it over to you guys to kind of fend for yourself in conversation, what we want to do now is Jeff's going to have the microphone. What questions do you have about this? And Mike and I will field the questions for the group. Like, you know, I don't.
Yeah, because this is so awkward to talk about. Like, we know it's awkward. Like, we talk about it like, no big deal, just go do it. But to start this, it is so awkward. So what are you struggling with as we talk about it? What doesn't feel real, or this feels like too big of to something to get over? Like, so lift up your hand. Jeff will come around.
Hi, how generic was it for you two? Meaning like when it started?
How generic was it?
Yeah.
Well, I think, so for me, I think because we just said, I think some of it, what we went through was so, we were like, we've got to figure this out. And I think generic is actually the danger. And so we just said the first time we got together, we said, hey, the first time we got together, we said the next time we get together, we need to tell our story. And so we backed up and we basically said, we're going to start from, like, when's the first time that you had any kind of sexual experience, reminder, and then go. And then we just talked about, like, we just told our story, like as far as that stuff goes. Because ours was definitely more focused on the girl side. So we talked about any sexual encounter we had and we remembered. We talked about any time, like the first time we remember watching porn. We talked, like, we really backed up the truck all the way to present day. So it really, honestly, when we got together, it really wasn't very generic. We just said, and here's the weird dynamic with it. Once you get it all out, but one thing you realize is, whatever the thing in your head right now that you don't think you can tell someone, it's not a big deal to anyone, because everybody struggles with stuff. Like, everybody, it's not that big of a deal. So once you get it out, then to have the other conversation, the regular conversation, it is extremely easy to have but the initial one is just that. Does that answer your question? You can just shout it out. It's okay.
Oh, I'll field that one. So here's the thing. We did know each other. We were not tight. In fact, I think you even used the phrase, I trust you more than our relationship would dictate. So me going to him, I was looking for advice from a pastor. What he was willing to do was not be a pastor and be my friend. Because when we sit down, I'm not a men's director or a cop. He's not a pastor. We are two dudes trying to navigate teenage kids, family drama, work stresses, financial issues. My wife drove me bananas last night. Or, dude, things are going really good right now. I think that, you know, from there, the reason we are as close as we are is because we were willing to be horribly awkward up front, but we weren't close first.
Yeah, and I think there was a discernment behind that too, of knowing what he did for a living and him knowing what I did for a living. And there's definitely a risk involved with it, to be honest with you. And this is why I think you have to find someone that you feel like you can trust. Because I think I didn't know you very well, but I did feel like there was some element of trust there, probably just based on what he did for a living, the little bit we did know each other. And so, and then it was one of those things of, and here's for me, is you have to find someone who equally, or they're willing to do it. I think that's probably the side to it, because you can't feel like you're trying to chase someone down all the time, because you won't chase confession down. Like, it's not a fun, like, if you mess up, you almost want to avoid it, to be honest. You're almost like, I hope we don't meet this week. Oh. And so you need someone who's as in as you are, that's willing to go, hey, let's do it. So for us, the rhythm, we've tried it every other week. It really hasn't worked. We've tried it once a month. It really doesn't work, because if you do it once a month, you get weeks away from it, and either you don't bring it up or you don't talk about how bad it was, because honestly, you just kind of forget the pain of it and you don't want to talk about it. So the weekly thing has been a much better rhythm for us.
Well, and not just the weekly. You got to have somebody who that you got to tell on yourself. I bet it was, I don't know, it was sometime right after Ian. I texted him. I was like, I need to talk to you. I had something in my head, and I could tell you cognitively, this is irrational, but it is messing with my heart. I am sick to my stomach over it. And we talked through it multiple times, and the thing was, like, there were discussions I needed to have with my wife about it, and he wasn't going to let me forget. I spat that out of my mouth while it was still fire, and he held on to it for me. And when my own emotions settled down, he's like, hey, did you talk to Christy about that yet? Like, yeah, man, I did. We're good. It's all good. But he wasn't just going to let it float away. So that's a key thing. Yeah. So be willing to break the schedule.
That's good.
Thanks for coming down, Mike. When you guys are deep in the weeds, do you feel like, what if one guy's sharing more than the other? Is there a problem there? Or you call a guy out on it? Or how does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think we share, depending on seasons, what we're going through. That's a weird deal. Like, if I'm really struggling, he's not, you know. But what I would say is, if I ever felt like, or if he ever felt like, bro, I don't feel like you're being real with me. Like, you're not being authentic with me. I feel like we would definitely, like, I think if you're going to do this with somebody, if you feel like they're holding back, you got to tell them. Like, hey, I feel like I tell you all my junk, and I feel like you don't tell me. That's the only way. The only way for it to work is for both people to actually be open and honest with you. So I do think you have to call it out if you ever feel that way. But there are times where I'm going through it, and I'm going through a tough season, and he's not. And so it feels uneven, but there are moments where one is struggling, the other's not, and you just kind of hold each other up in those seasons. So
I think we can all relate to the sexual aspect of it, but what about other areas of our lives? How do those questions translate to finances? How do they translate to anger? How do they translate to other issues we have?
I got one for that. So, one, I would say you can't have any off-limits areas. Like, he can ask me what's going on in my brain in regards to temptation and lust or anything like that, but he can also ask me, like, hey, dude, are you actually tithing? Like, what's the numbers?
well, and as a pastor, I kind of have to ask that question. I'm just kidding.
I mean, like, he just has my card and, like, does it for him. Now, but there was a season, I was going through some junk at work. I was not a happy employee. I did not care for my boss. And Mike called me out, and he said, flat out, he's like, I wouldn't want to be your boss right now. And challenged me on it, and we talked some scripture and stuff like that, David and Saul, but he was willing to challenge me about my behavior and my reaction to my bosses, and there wasn't anything sexual about that. That was like, I wasn't getting my way, and I was going to pout about it, rather than submitting to the authority that I had been placed under.
Yeah, and I would say with that too.
What I'm asking is, what kind of questions do you ask?
Yeah, I think.
What's your focus?
So I think with people leaned in, I think some of the questions is, how are you doing? How's work? How's your wife? How's your kids? Like some of those, and then what I would say is that one, the person has to be open. So if you're struggling with something, there's an openness, and then the other person has to ask deeper questions behind it. Like, why do you think you feel that way? Like, what's going on there? So some of that is probably a little more organic than it is strategic as far as that. But it's that of, how you doing? How's it going? And usually it comes out on if it's not like a physical thing or not a sexual thing, we'll talk about some of those things. But it really is, we're trying to figure out the deeper reason behind it and the deeper things. And so that's where we are asking those questions, trying to root out some of those things. Because, I think if something's happening in James, it says, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. So if something flows out of us, it's because it's actually happening in us. And so as we're talking about it, and he's mad at work, or something's going on, or I'm mad at someone else, or something's frustrating me, that's usually a deeper issue. And so we do, I think, and I don't think it's because I'm a pastor and you're a leader, but I do think part of our role is we're helping them mine out a little bit and help us figure out what's actually going on the deeper side. And we're both pretty extroverted, so that helps too, of talking it out and going through it. But it really is just asking. And so sometimes it's, how you doing? How's your marriage? How's this? How's this? How's this? and you're kind of just trying to check in on all the different areas of what's going on. And then when you find one that's, yeah, so tell me more about that, or, we kind of dive in on that.
Yeah, I can remember years ago, a mutual friend of ours was talking about, he was having some struggles kind of getting in a groove, doing some accountability. And he's like, well, what format do you use? I said, well, it's very, very detailed. We sit down at the table, and one of us asks the other, what's going on? and the person who gets asked that question just basically vomits on the table. We pick through it for a little while, and then we switch. It's don't overcomplicate it in your mind. When you're in relationship with somebody, I mean, think of it. Your sibling, your spouse, your kids. If they're just off, you might have a hard time describing why you say they're off, but you know it. If I'm off or he's off, we're gonna know. And we have given each other the permission to poke on that spot, as long as it takes to figure out why it hurts.
Well, and I think one of the things that's helped me is, so last year, my mom in March got diagnosed with bile duct cancer. And then she passed away in August from it. So it was a very short stint of when she actually had it, got diagnosed and then passed away from it. And for me, part of if you're familiar with the Enneagram, I'm an Enneagram 3, so like I can project a strong image even when I don't feel strong, and I don't always process emotion, like it's kind of my personality. And how you doing? I'm great. It's like, I'm not great, but I can do that way. And one of the things that helped me through that time is Dave would ask deeper questions about it and would dive in a little bit more. So it kind of forced me to process things that I otherwise was not processing emotionally. And also through that, made sure I was processing those with my wife, because sometimes I just, I'll tough it up and do whatever. And so he helped me kind of like make sure I wasn't putting up a shell or doing some of those things. So it's just that going through different seasons where we have these conversations and we talk about it, and it helps open us up for everybody. And so we just kind of poke around and ask questions. In the other areas, the ones with the sexual nature are the most formal. The other ones are more relational, but we definitely see each other's roles as trying to ask questions to go deeper.
So, gentlemen, having had to counsel with men and stuff before, it's kind of a hard thing to open up. It's really to kind of gut yourself and put it on the table. Kind of walk us through a conversation, and truly, how long does it take in order to get to a level where you're productive? It's working for you.
Well, so first off, I would actually disagree with your statement.
Go ahead.
It seems hard. And everybody in here, you're going to be like, oh man, that'd be so tough. It's not. Because when you put it up against the things you stand to lose if you don't do this, then it becomes a very easy decision. And it's just that. You have to make a decision. What is it that I want? Do I want what I want in the short term, or do I want what's down the road? Do I want those long-term goals, and how do I get there? Well, and I think there were some really hard conversations, and I would say that any legitimate relationship, you're that early period, things are good, and you kind of level off, and then you get to a point where there's some conflict or an issue, and one person has to push against the other, and you have to make that decision again. No, this is the relationship we're going to be in. This is what we're doing. I had to do that where years into this, God did some work in my heart and convicted me, and I had to, I think you were in Tampa then, we met in Sarasota, and I had to sit down and be like, look, dude, this is what happened 30 years ago. And I never told you, and it's probably one of the most significant heart injuries I've ever had. And I'm sorry for never telling you. This is what I thought. And really, in that season, I had to come clean to my wife and three people, in addition to my spouse, on something that, quite frankly, I don't know that I'll ever talk about again, because I don't know that I need to. God convicted me. I needed to reveal it. But even then, what I knew, what the decision I made is, do I want what God's got for me? Or do I want to put a lid on what God's for me and just not tell anybody about this thing? I can't put into words how necessary it is to have an accountability person. I mean, and I'm not trying to trash the guy.
I agree. It is life. Like it is, like I don't know how guys stay pure and stay clean and stay without it. Like I really don't. I really think it's a big deal. I think even on, I think that the biggest barrier is the first conversation. Like how quick until it gets effective. Once you get past that first conversation, it's amazing how quickly it does become effective. And what I'd say is you just have to get into a rhythm. You have to commit to a time. Because again, for a while, it was Wednesday at 5 a.m., and then it changed, and he and I used to lead a boot camp workout deal at the church we were both going to, and we had like 30 people go to it. Well, we'd lead it, and it was at 5 a.m., which is crazy. And so we would do it after that. And then I moved, and then we started doing it on the phone. Like we kept having to change the time, but we kept having to choose that we were going to do it. But honestly, let me be honest with you, moving to Tampa, it's like, why don't you find someone in Tampa? And part of the reason is because I don't want to have that first conversation again. I've already had it with this guy. Like, let's find that guy and then do that. But that's where I would say, I think having that of being able to go through it, once you have that initial conversation, you give each other your daggers, and at that point, hey, you're all in, and you're going to have these conversations and go through it. So I think it gets to effective way quicker than you think. It is the weirdest thing. It seems like a mountain to climb, but then once you're over it, you're like, oh, this isn't a season. This isn't full of mountains. It's just like a valley. Like it's nothing now, because once you have that initial conversation, then everything else seems easier.
Yeah, and what I would add when it comes to in terms of effectiveness, really what I would say it does is it brings in your guardrails. And, if you imagine like a cliffside highway that, yeah, there's a guardrail, but if you step over it, you're plunging to your death, okay? That's your guardrail. If you cross that line and you can go all the way up to that guardrail and you're fine. There's nothing wrong with it. But you step over the guardrail, you die. Well, accountability helps me bring that guardrail way over here. Now, nobody else is paying attention to where my guardrail is. I am. And my partner is. If I step over this guardrail over here, I'm not falling off the cliff. But I will tell you, it feels scary being out there. Because we have worked so hard for so many years to get this guardrail way over here that if I step out of line, it's like, oh man, I need to make a phone call. This is stupid. I don't even know what I'm doing over here.
Well, and I think that's the idea. It's this. It's, if you're going to fall off the stage, it's here. But if you can set the line back here, then it feel bad when you take a step here. Like if that feels bad, you've not sinned, but you have crossed the line. And if you can do that, if you can set the boundaries so far back away from the actual edge that there's a lot of red flags and a lot of things that go off in you and a lot of conversations that happen to back way, 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 way up, because this isn't sin and this isn't sin, and I just talked to her, and having coffee with a woman is not wrong, and we just had a meal together, what does it matter? And we just rode in the car together, who really cared? None of that's sin. None of it is. It's not. But if you can say, I'm not going to ride in cars alone with women, and I'm not going to messenger on Facebook, and I'm not going to text without a group chat without my wife, and I'm not going to do this, and I'm not going to do this, and you back up and go, this is now the line that I'm going to have, and anything beyond this is sin, and we're going to hold each other not to that line, but to this line, and we have a whole different line. I'll tell you what, it keeps you away from it. It keeps you from the edge. So.
You both talk to each other honestly and openly about everything, but how has that come back to your wife and your family that you two are so close? How has that happened? Plus, how does it affect them that you have a really good friend that's not them? And has it improved your marriage and your family life that you're able to talk about things that you never could before with your family now that you've exposed it to your best friend?
Well, here's what I'd say. Your wife should not know everything. Should not know everything here. But she should know that you have someone that does. That is what gives her peace. That she knows. She knows. I mean, there's a book out there called For Women Only. A lady named Shanti Feldhahn unpacks how men think. And when women read that, they're like, "You guys are all sick. Like you're all like it is." And the answer is, compared to the way women think, the answer is yes, we are. Okay. Now she doesn't need to know everything. She doesn't need to know everything. Honestly, on a security level, it's not even good that she does. It's not good to know, and this is why your wife can't be accountability, because there are some dreams you're going to have, and you're going to wake up from that dream, and your wife doesn't need you to roll over and go, "Guess who I just hooked up with in my dream last night," okay? She does not need to know that. He needs to know that. It's good for him to know, but she doesn't need to know. So I'd say our wives, they know that we have somebody that knows everything. And then the other thing I would say is I don't know if you remember this. I'm gonna say it, even though it's your story to tell a little bit. But probably 8 years ago or something, somebody emailed you, or it was something, and Christy intercepted it, and Christy his wife read into it, and she came to me, and she said, "I got an email from this person. What's going on?" And I'm like, "Man, I've never heard of this person in my life. Christy, I'm telling you, unless Dave is outright lying to me, I don't think this is anything." And it was like absolutely nothing, right? Like,
Yeah, it was random, misplaced. It was not anybody who was on my radar. Like, I don't know, maybe I was on her radar, but she wasn't on my radar. So, like, we had never discussed it. But yeah, and what I would say is probably until then, every once in a while, my wife would ask, "What do you guys talk about?" And I'd be like, "Stuff." And you know, if it was something that I could talk about, like, "Oh, well, you know, Mike has two boys that are similar in age to my daughter," and it's like, you know, kid stuff, and you know, the kids are doing this in school, and blah blah blah, and yeah, I can say that. That's not betraying a trust, and or, "Oh, you know, this is what Mike's got going on at work," but she knew there was more. But here's the thing, and the reason why I was kind of chuckling as you were asking that question about whether or not how my wife feels about it. I think my wife loves that I don't cheat on her. So I think she's a big fan of that.
But I think there is a piece to if something happened with me or something happened with him, they actually have there is someone who they know knows. And there is someone who, and if they feel like, hey, there's something that spikes in them, they need to call someone to go, "Hey, we had an issue." Well, for me to be able to look her in the eye and go, "I honestly don't think I don't think this is an issue. Like, we'll get into it, but I don't think this is an issue." And to drop into his world and go through it like that, like, I feel like there's a peace side to all of that. That there's conversations that are happening that she's not wondering, that it eliminates some of that questioning and some of that doubt. And so we just talk about it and go through it. And again, if my wife asks me questions, I will be honest with her. I'm not going to lie to my wife. But I think there's maybe one time where I've said, "I can answer this question for you if you want." I have talked to Dave about this. But if you want me to talk about this with you, I'm completely open to talk about it. And I actually think we did talk about it. And I think after that conversation, she was like, "Okay, I'm comfortable with you and Dave having those conversations." Because it's just, it's challenging. Who's got it?
Where we
I
at?
can't see anything. Oh, right here.
Yeah, you kind of hit the nail on the head. I was going to ask kind of the same question, but it says that we're supposed to love our wives like Christ loved the church, right?
Yeah.
But Christ didn't lie to the church.
We don't lie to our wives either.
Right. So what if your wife is having the same thoughts and temptations that you have or we have? How does that go? So why wouldn't we be candid with them and tell them about it? And that's playing the devil's advocate here, because I was married once and not married now. But
So you're asking why not tell your wife?
yeah, why not? How do you know she's not going to be accepting of it, number one, and probably have the same
I don't know.
thoughts?
I don't know. I would say, honestly, I'm not sure that your wife is designed to handle the thoughts and feelings and like honestly, emotionally, I don't know that there's a healthy side to telling her that hey, you know that girl I work with? Man, I'm really struggling right now. Like, she's super hot. Honestly, so what it does is it puts an insecurity in there. It puts questioning, it puts doubts, and I do think there's a planting of seeds that happen that because I'm not telling her to tell her there's an issue, that there's an issue with that girl, I'm telling her to get it out. Well, if I tell her I'm planting seeds, if I tell him I'm uprooting seeds. So I think the difference in that is if you're that open with your wife, then I think there's seeds of doubt and questioning and jealousy and things that come in, which will be there'll be havoc in the relationship. But telling him any seeds that are in me, it'll unroot it, and that's a point of confession. That confess to one another so that you'll be healed. I actually think confessing some of those things to your wife will not cause healing; it'll cause damage.
Yeah, and you mentioned, what if she's having similar thoughts and similar struggles? Well, I mean, here's the thing. Everything that we've said, women should do it too. We shouldn't do that with women.
Yeah, and I don't, and I hope my wife, I mean, there's some of me, I'm like, if she's struggling with it, I hope she tells someone, but I hope she doesn't tell me, because I'm gonna wanna punch somebody. Like tell somebody, I mean, honestly, right? Like, to know, like, every time I go to work, this guy's really hot. Like, I'm gonna wanna go to work with you every day now. And so I hope she tells someone and they know that information. And if it gets to a certain point, of course, I should be brought in as a husband, but I hope she's confessing to somebody.
Well, we'll see how that works out.
Here, go ahead. You're right here. Why don't you yell it out?
Danny,
We'll
go
repeat
ahead.
it for you. Here, let me.
Oh. Now you're thinking.
So one thing that kind of came out during that last, conversation you were having, where your wife went to him, do the wives know that really they shouldn't go to the other? Because if you're sharing absolutely everything, and that person's holding your box of every thought you have.
I would say probably the uniqueness of that has to do with the fact that at that time, Mike was still a pastor at our church. And for that reason, there was probably a unique level of access that Christy had to you that I don't think would exist in a normal relationship. I would say, in terms of encouraging you guys to get into accountability, I don't know that needs to be there. Like, our wives are not accountability partners. I mean, they're friends. We all get along great. We spend time together. But they don't have that level that we have, and I wouldn't. I don't know that. I think the uniqueness of that particular instance had to do with his role as a pastor at the church.
And I would say that's only happened once, and I would not go, well, no, he's not struggling with that, but let me tell you what he is struggling with. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that. Now, if for some reason, let's say I was struggling, and hey, there's somebody on my radar in the last 6 weeks, man, this girl, and I'm struggling, and then Leanne approaches him and goes, hey, there's this girl, and names the person I've been struggling with. Well, you better believe that he's about to be in my world and about to be, you know what I mean? Like, so in that scenario, it's like, let me talk to him. And he's now invited into that space and invited to that world. But that is very rare and very random. So if Christy has an issue, if she would, she wouldn't come to me. Leanne's not come to you about anything. But if it was like a thing that the names align and things happened, I would hope if we're getting to a place where we're standing on the edge and our wives realize something going on and we come to each other, I mean, he's a cop. I'll still beat him up. Like I'll go to his house. Like we'll go to jail. So because to save somebody from going off the edge, you better believe you're going to show up at their house and do some of those things. So I think our wives know that if they ever sense that we're here and we're struggling and we're going through it, that they would come to one of us and kind of throw the flag and go, we need help and something's going on and I'm not sure. And I think it's more relational that way, I guess.
Yeah, and that was, she called you. You were like, hey, I don't think that's an issue. You called me. Yeah. And then I remembered I was driving home from work. You called me, and then when I got home, my wife and I had a conversation. And here's the thing. I had to put my ego aside for that. She was scared. And if you missed my conversation a couple of weeks ago, you'll understand why she was scared. She was scared. And in that moment, out of fear, she reached out to one of her pastors about me. We handled it, and then we had discussion. But what I would say is, honestly, I think that deepened her trust about what we do in the wake of that. Because that was kind of her chance to test it, in a sense. And what she saw was the process work right in front of her. All right, we got time for probably one more.
Hey, I'll just stand. So, Mike, I appreciate you saying, try Jesus, don't try me at your church, because that would be a bad idea. And that bro code saves marriages. But my question is, or I really just want to know your thoughts on exposing inner thoughts and emotions that aren't necessarily outside driven, whether it's temptation, maybe it's a feeling you have towards a family member, a feeling you have towards a child, resentment that you hold on to, but you've not outwardly expressed that to other people. And I one of the thoughts that comes to mind really is then essentially giving the enemy, if you would, ammunition to give you another angle for attack on things that you've held within you, you've not shown sign of, but you still hold on to it.
Okay, so that's a great question. So you're saying if you speak it out, the enemy has it now. That's kind of what you're saying? Here's what I would say. I think that out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. I think one of the issues that Jesus had with the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, he said that you were a whitewashed tomb. And the reason why he said that is because what they would do with their tombs, they would buy their tombs and they would wash them and they would ordain them and they'd be beautiful tombs, but inside the tombs are dead things. So they would act good on the outside, but they'd be bad on the inside. And I think that's the danger of it, is we think that if we can just not say it out loud, then we can still look good and be good. But I actually don't know I don't think that's actually how it works. I think if there are things on the inside that are messed up, I think one of the best things you can do is work on it. So for me, what I would say in that scenario is when those things come out of you, when those things are in you, I actually think that Dave's one of the safer guys to have the conversation with because he helps me sort it out. But usually when we get to a point on that stuff, usually we point each other to counseling. Like there are definitely things that we go through and we struggle with that we don't, even though I'm a pastor, like I can get you to like step 3, but I can't get you to step 10. I'm not a good counselor that way. I can help you figure out that you're a mess, but I can't figure out how to fix it. It's like, so I can tell you. And so usually, like on stuff like that, so for me, growing up, like my parents were divorced when I was young. When I was a kid, my stepdad was an alcoholic, very abusive. I was actually in a gang when I was a teenager. Like I dealt drugs. I was a mess. And I had all these anger issues and all these problems and all these fears and all these deals. And I had to go through a ton of counseling and a ton of forgiveness and a ton of things. So that's where I would say, I actually think that things are inside of you. Instead of stuffing them down, I do think your sin will find you out. But I think that because out of the abundance of your heart, your mouth speaks, I think eventually those things will come out, and they'll come out in ways that you don't want them to. And so I think one of the best things you can do is you indicate, like, gosh, I'm just mad, or that kid, I don't know why I just hate my nephew, right? Like stuff like that. Like I actually think to go to someone that can help you work through it is such a good deal. And so I think going to a counselor, talking to somebody who can actually process through it, but starting here is really good to go, help me figure this out. Because sometimes just talking it through helps me, but other times it's like, bro, Like he'll just tell me, you need to go talk to somebody. Like you're a mess. You need to go figure it out.
And from that, the accountability side is, hey, how's counseling going? I don't need to be his counselor to say, how's counseling going? Is it, oh, you're not clicking with that guy? So when are you calling another counselor? Like, what are you doing about that? I'm still going to help him pursue health.
And James says, confess your sins to each other so that you'll be healed. I think honestly, I don't know where this came up in church theology. Don't speak it out. Biblically, I don't know that you can actually find it. If you speak it out, then you give it over to Satan, then it becomes a reality. This whole speak it into existence and, man, I'm really struggling with lust, and now suddenly I am struggling and I'm having an affair just because I spoke it out. Biblically, I actually wonder if that's a trick of the enemy that somehow got into the church, because it is a lot in the church. Like, don't speak it out, or else the enemy will get it. But I actually think that freedom does not come from stuffing it. Freedom comes from confessing it. Freedom comes from speaking it out. There's actually freedom in that, and there's life in that, and there's hope in that, and there's the death. Jesus says the death happens when you seem like your life on the outside, but your death on the inside. Then that was his issue with the religious leaders. That's why he would sit with the sinners, because the sinners were sinners, and they just acted that way. His issue was, you guys are acting good, but you're being bad, and you're bad on the inside. And so that's where I would say, find somebody you can talk to about it, find somebody you can go through it, and if you don't know a counselor, what I'd say is this church, I'm sure, has 3 or 4 counselors that will help you guys deal with it. And this is a very side rant, and if you got unresolved issues with your dad, and I only say that in a room full of men, because if you have issues, a lot of times they stem from your relationship with your dad. Before the age of 12, anything that happened to you, you believe happens because of you, because kids are very narcissistic. So if you had a rough childhood, you got to talk to somebody. And I would encourage, I think one of the best things I've ever done was I went to a counselor consistently, and he helped me work through stuff and healing and so I think this relationship is so good, but I would encourage everybody, if you've never seen a counselor to work through stuff, I think it's such a good practice to do to get healthy and to work through it.
Yeah.
Amen.
At the end of the day, this is one part of it. There is a lot more to it. So, guys, here's the thing. We'll obviously be here, and I'm here every week. And this is, again, the topic that I feel like is the most important past salvation, because this is what is going to help you step into sanctification. This is such a big deal, and as guys, we just step over it because it's going to be weird. Man, be weird. Find somebody to be weird with, and your life will change. I guarantee it. Are you giving me the one more? It's 8:40.
You're on a roll. Call you butter. Come on.
All right.
So just being a contrarian, agreeing with my brother over there that said that we are the church, right, and Jesus and the wife, and et cetera, et cetera. We're the head and they're the body. I believe that we're one flesh. And as most of you guys know, the ones that know me, I moved here with my family from Miami, because Miami is like Vegas on steroids. And the temptation was everywhere. And I did cheat on my wife. And everyone here at my table knows, not once, multiple times. And I got to confess to my wife. And then we work together. There's no secrets. Even when I fantasize with a woman, I tell her. We go to the gym, and the guys here know. And I tell her, man, I can't believe I was checking out that girl. And you know what? She holds me more accountable than anyone else could ever hold me accountable. I'm not saying there's no room for this or this. I do the same thing with the guys here. But with my wife, I'm transparent 100%, and that's taking me. Imagine if you guys are saying that the edge is here, and with the accountability party you're here, with my wife, I'm all the way over there. Because if I'm telling her those things, I'm not even remotely close to do all those things, and I drop everything like this. The Holy Spirit has been cleaning me off and renewing my mind, and it's mostly thanks to my wife. And not only, and sometimes I tell her, like, my struggle right now is with work, getting up and being motivated for work, and I tell her, and she tells me, you know what, talk to Brad. Brad's over here. So I talked to Brad today because of her advice. She sees things that I don't see. And about just 3 weeks ago, she was telling me, Mario, you're witnessing to women. You shouldn't do that by yourself. I'm like, there's no guy that I don't think could have told me that, because she knows me so well. The other day, she told me, well, you know what? Let's just have one Facebook account instead of 2, and we're doing those things. And then I can tell you example after example after example that I honestly don't believe any guy can do for me except my wife. So.
It's awesome. Yeah. Again, I don't think any of this is like a hard and fast, never and ever. I think that's a pretty unique experience, and I think it's a unique experience. What I would say is for guys that have cheated on their spouses, at least for a season, there's a need to be completely honest and open about some of those things to go through it. But the fact you've kept it up with your wife, I think is, if that's what she wants and she's not jacked up by that, I think it's awesome. I would not say that the common experience for women is that they won't be jacked up by those things. That's where I would say, I think, so again, if you want to try it with your wife, good luck. But honestly, and I think she has to be very secure. She has to be like very secure, very, very, very secure to deal with that. And it sounds like that's what your wife is she's just a very secure person. So that's what, and that's what I would say with any of this. This is, you know, there's sometimes it's like you say things from a stage and people are like, yeah, but, and it's good to process that yourself. And I would just say for you guys, as you're processing through it, I think if you're confessing to your wife or confessing to someone, I think it's good to have guys that you can confess to because there's healing to go through and there's depth to go through. And the fact you found both of those things is incredible. And so I just think it's leaning in and engaging as we go through it. All right. Hey, I'm going to pray. You care if I pray?
No,
all right.
go ahead.
So I want to pray for you guys. I want to pray for you guys because I live in Tampa, but I lived in Fort Myers for 14 years. And I love what God's doing in Southwest Florida. I love what God's doing at this church. And I love your pastor. And I love the staff here. I love Dave. And I'm excited for the way God is moving. There's a momentum here at this church that is hard. I think you guys feel this like, man, we just like being, it's incredible. I think God is using the spiritual momentum. And he's raising the spiritual climate specifically in Cape Coral right now. And God is using you guys to do it. And the fact you're here on a Tuesday night, he's going to use you on the front edge of a lot of this stuff. So I'm going to pray for you men as you help continue to lead the church, support the pastors, and tithe, because that's right. All right, Father, thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to talk and be open and honest and just real. God, we're so grateful that you have given us other men who have stepped into a room like this on a Tuesday night and said, hey, we need each other. And God, I pray right now that you would give us that exact right person, or maybe those two people that we need to have this conversation with. We need to push a little bit deeper. We need to have the awkward conversation. We need to be accountable. God, we want to have the power that's involved in accountability. We want to have the healing that comes through confession. So Jesus, I pray that you would allow these men to step out of this room and to enter into accountable relationships where there is mutual trust and mutual openness, God. God, I pray for this church. I pray for Pastor Corey and the pastors here and the leaders. I pray an anointing for this season that, God, you continue to reach this community of Southwest Florida in amazing ways. God, your anointing will be on the leadership. Your presence will be strong in the church. And God, I pray for the building project that they're getting ready to do is to build this new sanctuary. Jesus, I pray that there would be a blessing and anointing of generosity on this church in Jesus' name, that you would move, that you would bring in just gifts like crazy so that this can be built so more people can come to know your love and your grace in their lives. In Jesus' name, amen.
Hey, thanks for watching the video. We hope you enjoyed it. Now, CapeMEN's more than just a Tuesday night men's group. So in order to find out all that we have going on, be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And click that subscribe button to stay up to date on all of our video content.